Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It is your girl, Brie Undeniably, and you're tuned into my new speaker series, Deep Conversations with Dope Individuals, where we're discussing development, decision making, and dedicating yourself to purpose. So, today, on a very special episode, we have a super dope individual and none other than my brother himself, JonRobert Tat Tartaglione. Um, before I get into the bio, because that'll be fun and interesting, I was thinking about this prior to everyone here. Obviously, all of my listeners, they know me as Bree. And that's how I really go professionally, is as Bree. And but my brother and really just close family and friends call me Bria, and you'll probably notice that if he happens to refer to me as that. And I just think it's funny because he goes by Tat literally everywhere. I've never called him Tat before. That even felt weird introducing him. So I'm going to call him JonRobert, but he does go by Tat. But again, that's kind of just a close family. I guess we've called each other our our names since we were younger. Anyway, this bio is ridiculous. Um, I asked him to send me a bio, and I know he's just sitting here. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see him just sitting here acting casual. Here we go. Once, maybe twice in a lifetime, if we're lucky, we find ourselves graced by a person whose magnificence is so overwhelming it borders on a spiritual experience. A, st- a star who shines so bright that the sun itself must stop and marvel at their incandescence. JonRobert Tartaglione, otherwise known as Tat, is that star. A scholar, an athlete, a gentleman, and a close personal friend of Barack Obama, it would not be a stretch to say that Tat is the standard by which all other men are measured. In my in my own words, I can't stress this enough. These are my own words. His generosity makes Mother Teresa look like Bernie Madoff. His intelligence makes Stephen Hawking look like Sarah Palin. And his humor makes Dave Chappelle look like me. He's a PhD candidate at Cambridge, and if you promise not to fact check him on Google, he's also the world record holder in the men's 4x100 meter relay. It is my absolute honor and an immense personal privilege to welcome the man who single-handedly inspired Louis Armstrong's song, What a Wonderful World, despite it being recorded 22 years before he was born. A human being so impressive, his parents must have been incredibly disappointed by any sibling to come after him. The, the greatest mind of his generation and my own personal hero, JonRobert Tat Tartaglione. Welcome.
Thank you, Bria. You didn't need to do that. A more kind of modest introduction would have been fine, but since it compelled you, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. That was for sure a historical one for me.
Mm.
So, before we start, since, well, we let that all simmer in your minds
Mm.
of what a truly dope individual JonRobert Tat Tartaglione is, I'm going to start with a couple quick shout outs because I always get to the end and then forget or get too excited. So, we're going to do shout outs now. So, again, while that simmers, shout out to Gotham Podcast Studio. That's where I am recording right now. They do my audio and visuals. So, really appreciate them. Shout out to MC Kicks. They are always supporting, though I'm not wearing any MC Kicks gear right now. They are always hooking me up with their dope merch. You can check out MC Kicks at EMCEEKICKS.com. No, yes, .com as well, but you can also check out their handle without the .com. And if you have not checked out, I have a lot of new merch on my website. So, you know my website. It's always linked. You can go to my website, breedandIably.com. And JonRobert, I'll let you do your shout outs. I mean, you can do them now if you want, but you can do them at the end as well.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we'll wait till the end. Okay, so now that I got those out of the way, let's get into it. So, as I like to start off all my conversations, I really took this from the counseling community. We like to meet our clients where they're at. I think it's a great way to sort of kick off the introduction and just have you tell us a little bit about where you're at and introduce yourself to everyone.
Sure. Well, it's going to be hard to beat the introduction that you personally prepared for me, but I'm happy to do my best. So, yeah, my legal name is JonRobert Tat Tartaglione. Everyone calls me Tat. Um, I'm a psychologist and behavioral scientist by training. I have a few master's degrees from some lovely universities. I'm joining you from London right now, jolly old London. It is pitch black out already, despite it being like 5 o'clock here. And I am pursuing my PhD at the University of Cambridge in psychology and more specifically political psychology, kind of studying how liberals and conservatives think differently, process information differently, see the world differently, et cetera, et cetera. How's that? Is that succinct enough?
That's great. Actually, as when you said what your legal name was, I forgot the most important shout out. And though I don't usually shout them out, shout out to mom and dad.
Oh, yeah, mom and dad.
They're very important people, obviously, in both of our lives. Sandra and Michael Tartaglione, thank you so much for us. And
Well done.
yeah, well done. Okay, so I thought that was really important to shout them out. Yes. Okay, so you kind of brought us through what you are doing. I want to talk a little bit about your business as well. Can you introduce that too?
Yeah, sure. So I run a small consulting practice. And when I say small, I mean it's just me, called Influence 51. Essentially, I teach clients how to leverage insights from psychology and behavioral science to build more effective strategies. Now, what those strategies are totally depends on the client. So if I'm working with a political campaign, I might teach them about things like message framing or voter turnout strategies. If it's more of a corporate client, I might teach them about marketing strategies or branding strategies or things like motivating employees. I've even done really kind of unique things with restaurants where I've taught them how to restructure their menu using tenets of choice architecture to influence the choices people make without the waiter or waitress having to kind of guide them.
Awesome. Okay, so I want to kind of bring it all together now. So you talked about the different degrees that you have, and I feel like those were like puzzle pieces for you. Like you got like this.
Want me to be more explicit? I'm happy to be more explicit.
No, I mean you can be, but let's just go based off what I'm going to lead you into. So you kind of talked about like you got one degree in this and then one degree in that, and now you're pursuing your doctorate at Cambridge. So like those all fit into something for you. Like I feel like at some point along the way you made a plan and you're like, oh, okay, like I got this degree, but I actually need this to fill in this gap, and now I'm going to push it further and just talk about that a little bit more. That development.
Well, first of all, you thinking I have a plan is pretty presumptuous on your part because that hasn't been fully developed yet. But okay. I think it probably helps if you talk about like my very loose plan. It probably helps to like go back to like college.
Let's do that. Bring us back.
So as you know, mom and dad, pushed us to go to college and get an education.
They did.
And rightfully so, because, neither of them were able to get a college degree. And so they really thought the importance of that. And I always feel the need to pause when I say that and make sure people do not conflate education with intelligence.
Yes.
There are plenty of people who have a lot of education and not that much intelligence, and vice versa. Yeah. So be very careful when you conflate those two things, because mom and dad, as you know, are two very, very intelligent people. But they never got, that degree, and they wanted you and I to get that degree. So I went to college, as you did. And when I went in interested in law. I wanted to do law and society. Because I was balling in Mr. Spring's law class when we did the mock trials.
Shout out.
Yeah, but
shout out to Mr. Spring.
Yeah, but I realized very quickly that like I wasn't interested in the law per se. I was more interested in like why we consider these things just. And so I kind of got shoved very quickly into the philosophy department, which was cool. But I graduated with a degree in philosophy. and realized that like I had no idea what I wanted to do, right? Because like getting the degree was like an end in and of itself for me. It wasn't a means to an end. And so I got that degree, and it was kind of like the dog that just caught the mailman. Like, what the hell do I do now? I
What's
had no idea
next?
what I wanted to do. Yeah, and for me, it was one of those things where like I had to take a moment to think like, what interests me? Because as you would probably imagine, the job market was pretty anemic for philosophy majors. People weren't clamoring to hire a philosophy
Yeah.
major. So I was kind of thinking like, what interests me, and what interested me about philosophy was human nature. It was all these different, usually old white dudes kind of, figuring out like, what makes people tick. And I decided that, because I was interested in human nature, I wanted to take more of like an empirical, data-driven perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Psychology kind of quenched that thirst for me. And so I started reading books. My After I read a bunch of social psychology, I applied for my first program at University College London. Got that, got a nice degree at University College London. Decided that I was interested in kind of broadening the psychology. So I went to University of Chicago in a program called the Social Sciences, the MAPS program, where I was able to study like a bunch of different hybrid psychological domains at once. So political psychology, evolutionary psychology, moral psychology, even things like behavioral economics.
Mm-hmm.
I eventually ended up at Cambridge because I just found political psychology the most stimulating of all of those. And so I decided that's what I want to get my PhD in.
Gotcha. Okay, so what I think first, I want to go back a little bit to this,
Yeah.
like, the post college moments, not necessarily for you, but for everyone. I just think that's like a universal thing. Like, when we're younger, we're given this roadmap sort of like, okay, you go through grade school, blah, 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 and then you graduate high school, and then you go to college, and then after that, you get a job and you get married and have a family or do whatever. Like, no one actually said that once you graduate from college, that like get a job and sort of just like the rest of your life is just there in front of you. Like, there's actually no roadmap for that, and no one really talks about that that really like gray area of like what the hell is next. Like, I graduated, but that doesn't mean that you are all of a sudden a philosopher. And like, you didn't become a philosopher because you graduated with a philosophy degree. It was that that job just wasn't right there for you. So I think it's really interesting that for you it was really just not necessarily trial and error, but just like leaning into something that you found particularly interesting and sort of building off from there. So I just want to point out that gray area.
Well, no, and I think that's important to point out too, right? Because like, in that retelling, it made it seem like, oh, I graduated, I didn't get anything with my philosophy degree, so I immediately pivoted. But like that pivot, that immediate pivot took me like 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah.
Like I graduated, there was a period of a few months where like I didn't do anything. I was just unemployed. I had a little bit of savings I was like living off of.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually I got to the point where it was like, I need to do something. Am I allowed to swear on this program?
Yes, you can swear.
Thank God. I was like, shit, because like I had no idea what I wanted to do. And so, I was fortunate enough where I found a program called City Year,
Mm-hmm.
which, if your listeners aren't familiar, it's similar to like Teach for America, but like you're like supplementary support in the classroom. But I did that for a year when I was kind of trying to figure out like what the heck I'm going to do with my life. And City Year was great because it allowed me to do something that was like really rewarding, really challenging, in that kind of 1 year period where I was like trying to figure my life out. But then even after City Year, in order to like kind of build my way up so I could get into some of the master's programs I wanted to get into, I had to do a lot of unpaid stuff. And so to pay the bills, I did worked as the first Postmate. I was in the first batch of Postmates in Washington, D.C.
It's really
when Postmates
impressive.
first came to D.C., I was in that cohort. So I was riding my bike around D.C. making deliveries. I worked the front desk at a building called the Ontario, some like just apartment complex.
I didn't know that, actually.
Yep, I
knew
worked the front desk there, usually the night shift,
Nice.
for a little while, just making extra money. And actually, one of my main sources of income was writing comedy for a puppet in the Netherlands. I was a comedy writer for like a 3 foot like orange puppet in the Netherlands. But the point being, right, is like I had to like figure out all these ways to like, not the most glamorous things in the world to like make money as I tried to figure out like, what is my actual passion,
Yeah. I'm stuck. I forgot about that. I forgot about the puppet in the Netherlands.
Yeah, that was paying my bills for a while. That puppet, God bless that puppet.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, so you had to basically pivot a lot to make ends meet and to figure it out. You were really, you were in that sort of the place where the caterpillar is about to become the butterfly, but you're still stuck in the cocoon and you're like, shit, get me, like, how do I get out of this thing? That's kind of what that space in your life reminds me of.
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
And now you're the butterfly.
Well,
let's talk then. You did all these sort of like odd jobs, or just jobs to make ends meet.
yeah.
And then at some point let's just piggyback right off of what you finished saying. You said it took me a while to find my passion. And so that I like to talk a lot about purpose, which we'll talk about more at the end of the podcast. But let's talk about that, finding your passion. Like, what did that look like? How did that, from puppet comedy writing, which I know comedy is in there as well. Yeah, let's talk about it though. Let's talk about that part.
Yeah. So, like I said, I kind of, so like, let me back up just a little bit back to like when I graduated college. I'm sitting, in my first apartment out of college was a windowless basement in Washington, D.C. It was not the most amazing place, but it was a bed. It was somewhere to stay. But anyway, like I said, for the first few months after college, I wasn't doing anything. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And like, I was kind of like content living off the money that I had like saved. And like, I was waking up at like, 1 PM, like rolling out of bed, going to the gym, starting my day around 3 o'clock. And, after a while, I kind of just like, after a few months of that, I kind of looked in the mirror and I was like, what are you doing with your life? Like, you need to do something. And I started getting a little nervous. Actually, I actually never told anyone this. I never told anyone outside of my wife this.
Okay. Let's hear it. I appreciate you.
But yeah, I'll say it on your podcast, obviously. But I actually, in the midst of like this kind of like, caterpillar stage, I had my first and only, thus far, panic attack, where I actually, I went to the gym. I went to the gym one day, and I was at this point where like I just like couldn't really figure out what I wanted to do, and like I kind of like started feeling like, all these people who had such high expectations for me, like, am I going to amount to nothing? Like, am I going to be, just average or mediocre? And that really bothered me. I remember like I was setting up for a deadlift.
That's like not the right place to have a panic attack.
Yeah, I went and like stood up to like lift the bar, and I like looked down, and I started like, my breathing got really shallow, and I was like, all these thoughts were running through my head, and like I kind of like felt a little dizzy, and like I felt bad, I felt guilty, but like I left all the weights right there, and I walked out of the gym and like went back home, and like I was fucking I cried a little bit. I was nervous. I was like there was so much of me that was worried that I wasn't like any potential I had was not going to be fulfilled, and I think a lot of people feel like that, and I certainly did. And so, that was a moment for me where I was like, I really need to figure out like what I want to do and like go after it. And so for me, it was psychology, because psychology, especially social psychology, which was like my first love. I picked up the book The Social Animal by Elliot Aronson. There's another book called The Social Animal by David Brooks. I'm sure it's a great book, but Elliot Aronson's is the best social psychology book you could ever pick up. And I read that and I fell in love. And like that for me was like when it clicked that like I'm fascinated by human nature. I'm fascinated by like what makes people tick, what moves people, what are the factors that change our attitudes or shift people's decisions, change their behavior. And so I just kind of started reading a bunch. And these books fascinated me. They kept me engaged. And that was kind of how I discovered that like that's really my passion is like I want to be able to teach people about people, because everyone has their own theories. Everyone is what psychologists would call a folk psychologist. Because we interact with people on a daily basis, we all have our theories about what motivates people and what makes people tick. But when you actually start diving into the academic literature and the data, you start to see, there's been a lot of these fascinating studies that people just don't know about that gives you pretty deep insights into like the minds of others. And I always found that really interesting.
You just gave a ton of information. First, I have to I have to go back and,
Yeah.
obviously, and that's what I'll do whenever you tell stories. I'm going to go back to the beginning and, let's break it down a little bit more, but I do thank you for sharing that here to
Yeah.
my worldwide audience because because that panic attack piece, like that is actually something so important for other people to hear, because you're right, you nailed it. Like that, it's something that is probably happening in some capacity to a lot more people than we're okay to admit. Like there's a level of almost shame or whatever it might be that you're feeling in that moment, because panic attacks are real and they come
Yeah.
on out of nowhere, and they are it's a physical reaction, but the fact that that was almost like this, or at least one pivotal point for you, I think is super important, because you really had a panic attack about like, what am I doing for the rest of my life? Is all my potential lost? Like, I know I am this incredible creative like human being who has all of this pent up potential, but where am I actually channeling it? How am I actually going to let the world um, see that in me as well? So I mean, I think that that's so huge for you to share here, because I think many people sort of on this journey of life, but on any type of entrepreneurial path or path to try to self-actualize, which is something I've talked about a lot, like becoming the best version of yourself, that's something that we go through. So I really appreciate you speaking to that. And then I think it's really cool because you've spoke about the social animals so many times to me, and I think it's funny because our paths, you being my older brother by 20 months and 20 days, as mom and dad will always say, just about 2 years. But I feel like I really mirrored your path in psychology. I know that I had a lot of those very like we have had a very similar journey, and I feel like I followed in your footsteps, like one with the reading. I know you said like you picked up that book and then like you really did become like a voracious reader, like you were.
Which, by the way, your listeners should know
Yeah.
that was not always the case.
Yeah.
I am not particularly proud of this, but like all throughout college, I never read a book once in its entirety.
Yeah.
Like I would read as much as you needed to read to like get a decent grade, but like once that was accomplished, the book went away. It wasn't until afterwards I kind of was trying to figure out what I was interested in that I started reading a lot.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I'm saying in the same sense that like I was on a similar like WTF path where I'm just, trying to figure it out. And I feel like I'm right at kind of right at that stage where I'm just wiggling out of my cocoon right now, like with starting this podcast. And, for me, it's been a year, and for you, it's been a little bit longer. But what I'm saying is, um, I I mirrored your trajectory. I saw that you started reading a lot and that it was in psychology, and you told me about the social animals so many times. And then I started getting interested because you would tell me about different things that you were learning. And then I think if I'm correct, this was maybe at some point after this, you started to build your business, which I want to talk about. But you started telling me all of these different psychology stories, essentially, and basically like what the outcomes were. And I was like, oh, that's really intriguing. Like, that's interesting to me, and that kind of brought me, again, like I said, I mirrored your path. Like, I started reading a lot more. Same thing. I did not read either. Like, I really didn't at all until I
Mom is
started.
going to be so pissed when she watches
I
this.
was just gonna
She's going to be
say.
like, I told you to read. I used to read to you all the time.
I know. And it's so true. Like, I really did. Like, in high school, I skated by, and I skated by with ease. Like, I really did. It was like, oh, okay, like, this is simple. You read, kind of what you need to get by, but you never actually had to finish the book. There was enough information, even in the internet back then, for Spark Notes. I mean, there really was, like, there's ample information to get away with not doing it, which I don't advocate for, but it's interesting because I didn't find reading exciting or fascinating in any capacity until much later in life. For me, it was grad school as well. So I did the same thing, and I got interested in psychology sort of after you did, and that's how I really liked like the therapeutic aspects of psychology and how I ended up in counseling psychology. And here I am now, still using those skills, but also using myself as a client avatar, someone who is trying to build, a brand. What are all these other people doing who have built something? And I like to dig in to the development and the decision making and sort of that purpose piece, which are all very grounded in, my counseling psychology practice. But let's go into that piece of, like, so you got really interested in social psychology. You really were interested in, what makes people do what they do. And when was the point for you, or like, just bring us down the next phase, I guess, where you started building something out of this?
Yeah. So before we get into the building, I'll
Mm-hmm.
tell you like where the idea kind of started.
Okay,
So
please.
call me naive, and maybe I'm sure I was naive,
Mm-hmm.
but the last job I had
Mm-hmm.
before I went and got my first master's
Mm-hmm.
um, was in consulting, and up until that point in time, I had no idea that like the field of consult. I mean, I knew it existed, but I guess I just didn't know like what it entailed. I never like thought about like, oh, what's a consultant do? And like going into consulting really kind of changed my perspective, because the consulting firm that I went into, I actually got in by meeting the founder,
Okay.
Howard Ross. Cook Ross is the name of the
Mm-hmm.
firm. Wonderful firm, by the way. And I met Howard because Howard was giving a presentation to people at City Year. And he was talking about all these psychological concepts at that point in time that I was reading about in the books. Like City Year was that point in time where like I was doing my reading, I was trying to figure out like what's my next step,
Right.
And Howard comes in, he starts talking about all these things that I was reading about, that I was fascinated in. So anyway, I ended up striking up a relationship with Howard. We kind of went back and forth for a little while. I was at the University of Maryland doing free research for them. Like I was working as a research assistant at the time, and like driving around, delivery stuff and stuff like that to pay the bills. And so I would tell Howard about the research we're doing in Maryland. He would tell me, what's going on at Cook Ross. Eventually, I get offered an internship at Cook Ross, and that kind of became a job. But this is a long way of saying Cook Ross got me this exposure to this idea that there's an industry where companies will pay you for your knowledge. Mm-hmm. Companies will pay you to use your knowledge and come in and solve problems for them, or build strategies for them. And to me, the notion that like I could have a business that was literally just me going in and teaching people what I know and solving problems for them was like awesome. So I love that idea. And that really, again, as naive as it might have been, that kind of opened up my mind. And so when I graduated from UCL, right, I get my master's, or a few months before I get my master's, I start realizing that like I'm going to be in that same position again in a few months where I'm going to need a job and I
Right.
need to do something. So I started thinking, like, how can I support myself and still do things that I find intellectually stimulating, that I find engaging? And like, I knew what I found engaging was teaching people about all these really interesting psychological and behavioral science concepts and how they can use them to be more effective in whatever is they're doing. And so I remember, like, I reached out to a few of my friends who were lawyers at the time. And like, I was asking them, I was like, in your, legal trainings, do you guys, talk about this concept? Do you talk about message framing? Do you talk about loss aversion? Do you talk about, psychology of effective storytelling? All this different stuff that, like, for me has obvious applications to like trial lawyers, especially. And they were all like, no, we don't talk about stuff like that. And then, I reached out to someone who was in the political, domain. And I kind of was asking them, like, do you guys, go over, kind of the recent literature on, like, the behavioral science of voter turnout, things like this, or the most effective way to kind of craft campaign speeches. And, they were like, well, we kind of have these ideas about how it's done, but we don't always like refer to academia. And so I was kind of like, there's so much knowledge in academia that isn't making it into like the domain of people who are non-academics.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be really useful for these, these different people. And so honestly, the way I kind of envisioned myself and the way I still kind of talk about myself is I'm a translator. I'm literally translating, these findings that people who are not in academia find really daunting, really kind of complicated. I'm translating them in a way so they're palatable, they're digestible, and they're usable for non-academic audiences. And that's kind of, the way I pitch myself is there are plenty of people out there who are smarter than me, right? But what makes a great consultant in my mind is not necessarily being the most intelligent. It's being able to disseminate the information, to talk about, right, that content in the way that your client is going to understand, right, that it's going to click for them, and the way they are going to be able to use it most immediately and most effectively. And so Influence 51 was kind of just my way of like, how can I work with all these different types of clients, but still do essentially the same thing, which is just like teach them about these things that we know in academia and how they can use it in their domain to be more effective.
I think it's so cool. I'm going back to the puzzle piece example because I think it's so pertinent to what you have done and what you have built. Like, because coming up with Influence 51, it started with you doing all the reading, and then all of a sudden this person comes in to speak at, this job that you're doing that is not really doesn't have anything to do with what you want to do. It just is, a challenging job that's giving you, income. Not that City Year wasn't an amazing job for you. I know you got a lot of value from that, but it wasn't in the field that you wanted. All of a sudden,
exactly.
And all of a sudden you're reading all this stuff, and this person comes in and starts to talk about all this stuff. And for you, like, that was another like, oh wait, I can talk about these things. And then you got the job with them, and you also started really doing it yourself. You basically took steps to identify a gap to fit in exactly where you were perfectly fit to be.
Yeah. I think that's true. And I think, part of it was also like trying to figure out like how do I fit myself in a way that like I'm going to be happy with, like I didn't want to like fit myself in a place that like was just open and there. I wanted to like find a way to fit in to a place that like I also would be kind of satisfied.
So for you, that was using the information that you were learning, like the knowledge that you found most interesting, and then identifying those gaps in different marketplaces that weren't getting that academic knowledge.
Absolutely.
Okay, so then from there, let's talk about the takeoff. You have this idea. Influence 51 is put together. There's a clear need. You've clearly identified the gaps in the market. I mean, it's like all of your puzzle pieces are there except for the execution. How does how does this finally become a thing?
So let me preface this by saying that I don't know if what I'm about to say is the best roadmap for individuals. I'm not necessarily advocating that you take this approach,
We like to hear
but
the mistakes.
I'll be as candid as possible about like what I actually did.
Yeah.
Um, so so I come back from London. I have this idea for Influence 51.
Mm-hmm.
I have to figure out, first of all, I have to figure out all these things I never thought I'd have to figure out. I have to figure out how to fill out, LLC paperwork, how to get this, incorporated, at a state level. I have to figure out, how to, design business cards and make business cards. I have to figure out how to build a website, which by the way, like if people who saw the first iteration of my website, it looked like I just like took a Word document basically and put a few colors on it. Like there was nothing sophisticated about it whatsoever. And like now it's still not the most amazing website in the world, but like I'm proud of it because, I built that. Like no one helped me. And like here's where again I want to really be explicit that like I don't think, and as a matter of fact, I won't even say I don't know. I don't think you should take this advice. But for me, this is just who I am. I'm not great at asking for help. I'm not great at being like, hey, I need your help doing this. Hey, can you help me out? I always feel like I'm burdening people. I don't like burdening people.
There's psychology behind that.
Yeah, well, there you go. So I'm sure I'd be a great case study. So I wanted to do it all myself. And I didn't really want to reach out to people and be like, hey, can you refer me, to this person? Can you introduce me to this person? And so Influence 51 was literally me individually like writing emails. And I'm doing it like this because I type with two fingers. So it wasn't like it was a fast process. I wasn't like automating the process. It was just me grinding out emails every single day, right? Just hoping that someone would give me a chance. And like that's a process in and of itself because you try to figure out like which emails are getting the least negative responses because some people are like really mean, like super mean. They're like, stop emailing me. I'm like, this is the first time I ever emailed you. It wasn't like I've been pestering you. But anyway, that to me was actually like, that was something I had to overcome. There were days when like I would receive a really negative email back and like I don't always have the most self-esteem when it comes to like being rejected. And so I would be cranking out 100 emails one day. I get one negative one negative email back and like it would really like hit me and like I'd be discouraged. And like the next day, like I might not write any emails because like I kind of start second guessing myself and is this really worth it? So anyway, Influence 51 was a long time coming because between the end of 2016 or early 2017 when I started, there was a 1-year gap between mid 2017 and mid 2018 where I was getting my second master's at U Chicago. So Influence 51 kind of stopped during that point in time. And so like there was a lot of starting and stopping. I wasn't really getting a lot of momentum. And like I was again trying to do things to pay the bills in the meantime. Right. So I was tutoring mostly. I was kind of just tutoring different people to pay my bills. But yeah, Influence 51 was just me kind of just cranking out these emails day after day. And then I probably got one paid gig with Influence 51 in the first, like, if you were to take out that 1-year gap and kind of look at it as like a continuous thing, I probably got one paid gig in the first like 9 or 10 months. And it wasn't that big of pay, like it wasn't super impressive. And so like, it wasn't like I was living off of Influence 51. I was trying to build Influence 51, but I was living off of other stuff. And I finally got like my first big break in like late 2018. there was a company who was interested in like figuring out how people make decisions within their particular field, architecture.
Okay.
And they ended up having a call with me, and I said, how much do you know about how people make decisions in general? And I didn't mean that to be dismissive or condescending, but there was three people on the call. They were like, well, not really. And I was like, well, there's a lot of literature out there. There's a lot of data out there that I can teach you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see, if that's going to be helpful rather than launching into something that might be too specific. And so I started doing work with this company, and long story short, they're still a client of mine. I got really lucky. They have, like 50 chapters throughout the country, and they have a national office, and they have a foundation arm. And I've been doing work with them ever since. But it was between a few, very big clients that I kind of got lucky. I'm not saying that to be, to kind of feign humility. I got lucky. I'm sure there are plenty of people like me who crank out those emails every day and don't hear anything.
Right.
I heard something. And so, that's what happened for me. But yeah, I think a lot of it is, unfortunately, can you get that break? Can you get that, that break? And when will that come?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you were persistent as well. Even if like maybe you took a day off, or I know that you went all in for a while sending those emails. And I mean, I think everyone's break will come as long as they are really fulfilling a need. And I think that is what's really important too, and you really clearly identified that too. Like, you found a need. You saw that there was a gap, that all this academia, all this stuff that you knew you were really good at, you excelled in school since kindergarten. And so you knew that, but there was all this information that wasn't being brought to people in a way that makes it palatable and understandable. And so, I mean, there was a clear need there. And I think, for you, it was just the persistence of, getting that break. So I do think, I want to give you more credit than saying it was just luck. Maybe luck that you found the right client that also had a really large, organization that has still here in 2021. Actually, this will be 2022 when this comes out. So here in 2022, that, really liked your content. So, but I think what you're saying is so important for people to hear as well. Like, it's not one email to your ideal client and then all of a sudden, you're off to the races. It's hundreds, if not thousands, of emails to probably your least ideal clients to dip your toe in the water. And that's
yeah,
that.
No, I think that's 100% true. And I also think that, one of the things that like I had to convince myself of is like, there are going to be some clients that they just don't like you. They just don't want you, and so you got to kind of, learn to just, take the lump and keep moving with those clients. But there are other clients, especially if you're trying to do something that isn't that popular, that not that many people do, which when I started this, to a degree, that kind of was, some people, when I would write to them, didn't really know what I was talking about, or couldn't really visualize how it would be used. And some of those clients don't say no because your product isn't valuable or your service isn't valuable. It's because they just don't know what exactly it is you do. And I say this because one of my clients now is a client who rejected me years ago because they couldn't understand what it is I did and what value it was that I was going to bring, right? And so I think that's really important for people to understand. That's one of my learning things was like, you can have the best product in the world or the best service in the world, but you need to know how to teach other people about what it is that you do and why it's valuable for them. And it took me a while to be able to do, and it's still a learning process for me to figure out like what clients want to hear what to really get my message across. But that's really important because the clients who reject you, some of them could maybe benefit from you, but it's your, it's kind of the onus falls on you to like teach them why you.
Yeah.
you know?
It's so funny that you're saying this because in so much of the entrepreneurial research I'm in right now is really about that niching down aspect or niching down. I don't like niche.
Niche, go niche.
Niche, yeah, it sounds better. So getting super clear on the message, but I've also heard it and seen it reproduced in so many ways that almost like the elevator pitch that seems to be proving itself over and over again. Which you actually said maybe 10 or 15 minutes ago. It seemed like you said it or you had it pretty nailed down. The I help blank do know or understand blank
Yeah.
so that they can blank. And so it's like saying exactly the clients that you help, or, I help lawyers or I help companies or I help, dreamers, whatever it is, do know or understand blank for you, psychological concepts in their field, in order so that they can implement those concepts into their company to thrive or whatever it is. But I've heard that language, like that specific line, be the one that seems to almost like fill that void that you're saying. Like if it's not your client, they might just not be a client yet because they're not understanding what you're saying.
Yeah,
Or what you do.
I think, no, I think that's true, and it's funny because like you're doing research on this, which I probably should have done. For me, it was just like trial and error. So like I just happened to get to this point where apparently all the books are pointing you towards, where like I have this kind of little spiel now, because it's one of those things. There's a horrible phrase someone told me one time, but it's apparently a phrase that's popular in writing called "sometimes you have to kill your babies." It's a horrible phrase, but apparently it means like there are going to be certain things that you write, right, that you're going to love, certain sentences, certain paragraphs that you love.
Got it.
But might not serve a purpose, might not be as loved by the audience. And so sometimes you need to cut those things. And that was something that I needed to learn too, because like I talked about how my website, the first iteration of my website was like, a WordPress, like, just a Word document basically. The first iterations of like the emails I was sending must have been like, if you printed it out, it must have been like 3 pages long, right? It was like, because for me, like I cared about this stuff and I found it interesting. And so like, I was, kind of like hopeful and naive again that like other people would find it interesting too. But they might find it interesting, but they don't have the time for that. Right. And so I had to kind of learn the hard way that like, as much as I think it's important to include this, as much as I want to talk about this, I really need to nail down like what it is I do in a pretty succinct way in order to get people hooked enough where I can start talking about the other stuff that I find more interesting.
Yes, that does make a lot of sense. I can definitely relate to that too. It's like I want to just bring all of these things to the table about all everything that I know in counseling psychology, but that's not necessarily serving the purpose for the people that I'm working with. Definitely finding that gap where you'll fit in and that offers the client the value that they're looking for. That's again, you're nailing all these things that I'm learning as we go and as we speak about.
Yeah, it only took me like 6 years. So
you said what?
It only took me like 6 years. Like I just went to the library and got it apparently.
All this reading that you did, I'm surprised you didn't do any reading on, building a business. However,
No.
I think it's important to also note, which I don't know if I've ever actually said, but our dad was, and our mom was a huge part of it, but dad built a very successful taxi and limousine transportation company. And, that was all we knew growing up was, dad had his own business and mom was part owner in the business as well and did they helped each other out. They were the left and the right hand in building this thing. And, that's what we saw growing up. So I would say for us as well, we kind of had that firsthand experience and sort of seeing what it looks like for someone to grow. Well, I don't remember when it started. I think I was a seed, but grow a business and, in an entrepreneurial sense. So, not that that's a preemptive thing for anyone, but I think it's sort of interesting, and maybe why you didn't read the entrepreneurial books because you saw it right in front of you growing up your whole life. So I know that for me, that's one of those things, something that helps motivate me in my journey is knowing that once I figure out exactly what it is, I'm so capable of moving into it because I've seen all these people around me who have been so capable of doing the same. So I think that's also maybe a piece of advice to bring to listeners as well. Like, your capabilities are not what you might be thinking they are right now. Like, you are totally limitless in your ability to build something if you choose to do so, and maybe look to some mentors or friends or family who have done so, as that motivation or inspiration or education.
Yeah. Ask for help too.
Ask for help. Yeah, don't
Nothing
be.
wrong with asking for help. Don't be like me. It slowed me down a lot, I'm sure. But yeah, Bria, I did want to make sure that, we give, mom and dad their kudos, and
Mhm.
because dad, I have talked about it before, I do think that, watching dad kind of operate his business and build it with Peepaw from pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
Definitely played a role in me wanting to kind of be my own boss.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I think it's important. We definitely have, and we're very, very blessed and lucky to have a super strong family unit with our parents. So, just giving them the love and the praise that they deserve, um, because I know that they would expect that and want that in this episode too. How could we not talk about them, right?
We only give them love and praise when they expect it.
Yeah.
We don't we don't want to just give them spontaneous love and praise.
Maybe expect isn't the right word. Spontaneous love and praise, because they are really amazing. But we are winding down. We only have about 7 minutes left. I have a rapid fire question round for you. And then I will give you the opportunity to speak your last words, famous last words. Let everyone know where they can find you. And then if you have any shout outs, you can feel free to give those as well. But first, let's do rapid fire. All right. In the very beginning of this podcast, I said we're speaking on 3 things, which I think we covered a lot, except for one of them, which we're going to get to: development, decision making, and dedicating your life to purpose. The very first question on development: currently, right now, are you working more on personal development or professional development?
Personal development right now.
Awesome. Okay, decision making. And you probably know the psychology behind this, which is going to be interesting, but I just want to know your off the top of your head answer, which I think I already know. Decision making. Do you make more of your decisions based on choice or guiding voice? Guiding voice meaning gut reaction, intuition, spirituality, etc. Or choice meaning definitive by the numbers.
So I'm going to give a half psychology answer, half me answer.
Let's hear it.
I probably believe I make more of my decisions by choice.
Mm-hmm.
But research shows that a lot of that is just guiding voice being rationalized as choice.
Wow.
So that's kind of what I'll go with.
Okay. That's I actually I wanted to know more about that question that I was asking. So I'm going to use that for the next person.
Fair enough.
Okay, the last one is about purpose. It's a 2-part question. First, what's your definition of purpose? Do you have one? Or any thoughts on what it could be?
I didn't come prepared with one.
You didn't have to. Or what does it mean to you? Like,
I guess if I thought of purpose, it would be thinking of what I can do to simultaneously drive myself and others forward.
That's awesome. That's actually so spot on with my sort of succinct definition of purpose. I say purpose is passion plus people. So it's really, taking something that you're passionate about, and we can have several passions. So taking one of those passions and figuring out how to bring it to the world. so that they can experience that with you. So I think you're spot on. So that leads to the final rapid fire question, the 2 parts. So is dedication to purpose a singular moment in time or a daily practice?
It's got to be a daily practice, right? I think it's got to be a daily practice.
Okay.
I can't say now. I can't say that with full confidence that I do practice it daily. But I think if you're going to be successful, you need to make an effort to practice it daily.
I love that. Thank you. Okay, that's the end of my question round. Let's hand over the mic to you again one last time. Final last words and where we can find you and shout outs.
All right. I didn't come prepared with any final last words either.
Okay.
However, I will say, I feel like a podcast. I feel like I wish I had a podcast like this, when I was kind of in that moment where I didn't really know what I wanted. I was, nervous, nervous that, I wasn't going to be not only what everyone else thought I could be or would be, but also what I knew I had the potential to be.
Yeah, because you really came out the gates in high school swinging with with all your awards and accolades and king of this and class clown of this and top of this, and you really you set the bar high for yourself.
Yeah, so I set it high, and it wasn't like college was a letdown, but it was just like one of those things where afterwards, when it was time to transition into like the real world, like I just didn't know. I didn't know like how I could continue to be, as great as I was in high school, doing something else. And so I guess I just, my final last words, I wish I had a podcast like this back then. I think it's really important to talk about these things openly. And like, I did want to share, with anyone who's listening, this, vulnerability that I don't think we talk about enough, because I certainly felt like that, anyone who saw me just suddenly like walk out of the gym that day with like probably a blank stare on my face. And then like, walked home and like, was crying, was nervous. Like I think we need to talk about that stuff more. And so, the point is like, I've been there and I'm now, pretty happy with where I am right now. I can't complain. And so I very much hope, Bria, that, Bree, I hope the people that you are inspiring will be able to tell these stories someday too.
I appreciate that. That is such a great way for you to wrap it up. And, I kind of think I'm learning by doing as well. So like I said, back in the middle of this, I'm my client avatar. I'm learning this as I go. And that's why I think it's so awesome to bring people on this podcast who are either in the same position as me or have gone through the same situation, because I'm using it to learn for myself. And I think that, like you said, the value is, it's in these stories, it's in these understandings, it's in those moments that you share with us, those vulnerable moments. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing that. And I wish we could go. I know that we could go for much longer, but why don't you let people know where they can find you and give your shout outs, and we'll wrap it up.
Oh, shit. Because I'm horrible with like social media and stuff like that too. So I don't really have any social media handles.
Just my website. Yeah.
Website is influence51.com, influence51.com. Pretty simple. So over the next few months, you can probably find a little bit more of my comedy coming out too. And so I'll be a little bit more diligent with that as well. But they can look for that if they want to find it. I'm not ready to give anything too easy right yet.
That's fine. Maybe at the time that this comes out, I can send them in that direction as well, because I mean, clearly by the introduction that you had me read or that I wrote, and you're writing for a puppet. I know that one of your true and natural passions is comedy as well, which again, that just speaks to how we can have so many different passions, and it doesn't necessarily need to be what we're putting our whole life into. We can have those hobbies as well, or other parts of our life. So I look forward to hearing that comedy as well. And okay, so that is that. I will post your handles and such. Shout out to your wife, Samantha.
Shout out Samantha, my lovely and supportive wife. Shout out mom and dad. Bria, shout out you.
Great.
I'm glad you're recording this because I'm never going to be this nice to you in a public domain ever again.
You all heard it straight from him. All right, it's been awesome. I will close it out here. I love you. I appreciate you. I'll talk to you soon.
Love you, Bria. Proud of you.
Thank you so much. Mwah, I'm proud of you too. Until next time, everyone, let this be the moment.